Pork chops when I'm hungry, whiskey when I'm dry, soda water when I'm thirsty, heaven knows when I'll die. Born in Honolulu, raised in Desha Lane, moved to Aliamanu, that's the Hawaiian in me. Aloha, mahalo. Aloha mai kako. I'm Uncle Kealoha. And as Ben said, I was born in December of 1946. So that makes me, places me at the beginning of the baby boomer generation. Go boomers, go boomers. And the song that I attempted is actually a family song. It's kind of our anthem, the Kelekolios and the Pa'ao family. And written by an older brother using a melody of a Frank Sinatra tune. It is sung at birthdays, at reunions, at funerals, every opportunity we get to celebrate our ohana, our family, and where we come from. And so the line that says, born in Honolulu, raised in Desha Lane, that's actually 1023 Desha Lane, okay? And having grown up in the 40s and the 50s, I want to share some of my experiences for 15 years growing up in that place. Okay, so how many of you know where Palama is? Okay, very good, yeah. So bordered by Palama Canal on one end and then Liliha Street on the other. King Street ran right down the middle of Palama, and there were all of these lanes that intersected into King Street. So there was Desha Lane, Akapu Lane, Pua Lane, bye Pua Lane, and Robello Lane, Austin Lane, Jack Lane, Peterson Lane, all of these lanes, and they all had their own little communities. Now in the 30s and 40s, there were these two-story wooden buildings, single-walled construction, that lined King Street. And on the bottom floor were all of these commercial spaces, and upstairs they rented out to renters, residences, okay? So if you entered Desha Lane, to the right in this long building, on the bottom floor was a grocery store run by Chinese. Then there was a barber shop, pool hall, and at the end of the block, Tip Top Cafe, which was known for its lemon meringue pie. On the left of the lane, there was another grocery store run by two Japanese brothers, the Fuji brothers. And my mother would write down a list, send me down to the store. I give it to one of the brothers. They would fill out the list, put it in a book, and have me sign the book. I take the groceries out. On Fridays, when my father got paid, my mother would pay for the groceries. So my signature was worth a lot more back then than it is today. Further on up the street, there was a shave ice place, crack seed, and right next to it was a Simon, and I cannot call it a restaurant because it was just a little cubbyhole eatery with maybe 4 tables at the most. And on Fridays, again, when my father got paid, he would take us to eat Simon, and all of us had a small bowl of Simon and a single stick of barbecue. You wonder, it's probably why Fridays is still my favorite day of the week. Going up the street, you come to St. Elizabeth's Episcopal Church and school, and I went to kindergarten at the school. And just up from St. Elizabeth, right next to it, in fact, was perhaps the most famous landmark of Palama, and that is the Kaumakapili Protestant Church, where there were services held in Olelo, Hawaii. And the spire of that church could be seen from miles around. However, that distinction of being the most famous landmark has been usurped. Just across the street, there's this neon crab on the walls of Tamashiro Market. And so Tamashiro Market is now the preeminent place. So if you've been to Tamashiro Market, you've been to Palama. Now, across the street on the Makai side, across from Kaumakapili Church, was Princess Kaiulani Elementary, where my 3 younger siblings attended from kindergarten to 6th grade. And just down from the school was Palama Theater. Theater's no longer there, but some of the structure is still in place, kind of Alhambra-esque building. And Saturdays, you'd find us kids there in the Popeye Club enjoying cartoons and whatever other fare they would show. One day, my brother was crossing the street to go to the theater, and he got hit by a car. And as he lay there, the manager of the theater ran out and consoled him and says, "When you get better, you can always come to the theater and you have a free pass." So we were all happy. Not that he got hit, but then he got a free pass, and maybe sometimes we would go with him to see the movies. Back down to the lane. When you entered the lane, it was a narrow lane, pretty short, maybe to the door and back here. And not enough room for many cars to park in the lane, but that was all right because not too many tenants owned cars back then. You go through a gate on a wall, up a broad staircase that was like about 30 stairs up, good for cardio. And as kids, we would take cardboard boxes and we would ride down that staircase, boom, 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 until we made it to the bottom. Cheap thrills, I call it cheap thrills. As you entered the apartment, there was a little alcove or an anteroom where we used the storage and a closet because we had many clothes hanging from the ceiling in that anteroom. But occasionally, it became a third bedroom. And that's because I always like to say that we were the Hawaiian Brady Bunch, his, hers, and theirs. My father had 3 children from his first marriage. My mother had 4 from her first marriage. And together, they had the last 4 of us. And so, yeah. And my brothers from my father's side were raised by our tutu in Kona. But when they got too hard to handle, she packed them up and sent them to Desha Lane. And for about 3 years, they were using that spare bedroom. My mother's side, their father lived in Waimanalo, and they were always in and out of our little abode there. The parlor, off of the parlor, you walk into the parlor, were the 2 bedrooms, tell me if I'm missing, you're missing some of this, were the 2 bedrooms. My parents' bedroom, where the sister that came after me was born, and my father played midwife, and I was probably crawling around somewhere on the linoleum floor there. And the next bedroom over were for the kids. So at any given time, there were 4 or 5 of us in a single bed in the bedroom. So talk about close-knit. We were tight as skin. Off of the parlor was our kitchen. It's a long kitchen, that very narrow. And the table was attached to the wall on the left with braces that held it up. And the appliances to the right, an ice box. Yes, Jeju, ice box. And a gas stove with a pilot light. You had to make sure the pilot light was on before you lit it and go. And then at the back of that kitchen was a sink and a small window above the sink, which let in light and air. But it also served another purpose, and that was we didn't have a garbage disposal. What we had was a garbage can, and it hung outside the window about halfway down the building, and we would scrape our leftovers, or if we were stuck at the table and our father said, "You have to finish that food before you can get up," we would wait till he left the room and throw the food on into the garbage can. And every day, the garbage man would come, pick up the garbage to feed his pigs. We had a back door and a staircase and back porch, and a staircase that led down to the ground level. And that back door saved us kids many a time. When the Mormon missionaries, and excuse me, when Mormon missionaries would come and visit my mother, they're knocking on the front door, us kids would dig out the back door, down the staircase, disappear for an hour until the coast was clear. We had a very diverse community. Our neighbors right on the apartment right next to ours were the Takaos, Japanese, Hawaiian family. Across our back porch, You could walk over the railing into the other building that was over there and to their front porch were the Tanakas. And then downstairs were the Tadleses, a large Filipino family. And across the street were the Gabriels. If any of you, and the Portuguese family, if any of you watch are up to Rainbow Sports, Warriors, Garrett Gabriel, star quarterback in the 80s, he's from that Gabriels that were neighbors of ours. As a young boy, as young children, we had to make up our own entertainment. TV didn't come till 1954, so we were doing all of these other things like riding down the staircase. But we had this special game that we loved so much, and it was called Banzai. You'd junk in a po, and whoever lost was the it. And it would take a empty milk carton or juice carton and place it in the middle of these warrens of buildings that surrounded a little square out in the middle. Place it there, and he would close his eyes and count to 10. And once 10, he would run around, and the kids would all hide. He would run around searching for where the kids were hiding. If he saw one, he would call him out and run back to that box and touch it. And if he got there before you did, you were detained in a little area near the center. But if you could outrun it to that box, you would get there and you would kick it, and then you would yell, "Banzai!" And everybody who had been caught or detained were free to run around and hide again. And she would start the process, he would start the process all over again. I have 3 memories I want to share with you. The first one is of a night when there were at least 4 of my older brothers in residence with us, and they were downstairs in the lane practicing. They were going to enter a talent show. So, they're going through the songs, and at one point we hear them go, "Shado-be-sho-be-do, boom, 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 shado-be-sho," in the still. And we were up there in the bedroom above us with the 5 of us, the younger kids, and we answered with, "Tonight you're mine completely. You give me your love so sweetly." And they came back with, "Staggerly, Proud Billy, I can't let you go with that. You have won all my money and my brand new Stetson hat." Upstairs we answered with, "Day, day, 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 day. Oh, daylight come and me wanna go home." And this went on for about an hour, 2 hours, until one of the 2 groups gave up. And thankfully, the neighbors applauded as we finished our concerts. So it was an epic night of family, familial sharing and support. Back then, communities supported one another. We didn't scream at one another. Well, not always, maybe some. But most of the times, we supported the activities of each other's families. The second story I want to tell is in 1952, the Honolulu Housing built mayor rights housing, okay? And by 1954, there were like 20 buildings, 3-story buildings, and hundreds of new neighbors, instant neighbors. And for the most part, we got along. Those of us in the lane were the old poor. Those up there in mayor rights housing were the new poor, and we kind of tolerated one another. Well, one day, my sister got into a fight with a young boy from the housing, and he got injured. So indignant, he and his family, parents, and some of the neighbors from mayor rights came down to our lane. They called a policeman, a cop, and he called my sister to come down from the apartment, and I joined her down there. And he looked at my sister, he looked at the boy, he looked at my sister, he looked at the boy, and he realized that the boy was about a head taller than my sister. And so he says to her, "Young lady, what did you use to give this boy a black eye?" And she raised her fist and said, "This." It's exactly the reaction we got from everybody that was standing there, even the people from Mayor Rights. And my brothers were yelling out there, "Yeah, all right, sis, all right." She, in fact, went on in 6th grade, was the first girl Japanese pupule officer, you know, the JPOs that got captain in that school. My last story is a story that I'm ashamed to tell somewhat because, and it's the first time I'm going to do it in public. I'm not proud of the way I reacted. I was at Kamehameha School's 4th grade, and I had a classmate named John Klein, that nice Hawaiian name. And however, on his mother's side, John was descended from the Lindsays and the Parkers on the Big Island, so a real Kama'aina family. But he looked like a John Klein, blonde hair, blue eyes, freckles, and when he was flustered, it turned all red. So every year, Kamehameha Schools has a Christmas concert. And so this year, the Glee Club wanted a young boy to portray Santa Claus. So they asked my 4th-grade teacher, and she says she chose John for obvious reasons. But they also wanted someone, because it was all in Hawaiian, the song, to point out his beard, his ume, to point out the bag and the hat. So I was chosen to go with John, and they would sing, and I'd point out the different. So we had our 2 minutes of fame back then. So we became good friends, and John was going to have a birthday party, and he invited me to come. And he said, we'll come and pick you up at your home. And panic set in. For the first time, I felt ashamed of where I lived and where I grew up. So I told him, no, just pick me up where the bus drops me off on the corner of Liliha and King Street, and I'll be waiting for you there. So Saturday rolls around, they come, I'm not there. On Monday, I apologized profusely, saying that I'm sorry that something came up. And I said, would you forgive me? And John says, yeah, sure, I forgive you, I forgive you. However, I did not forgive myself. And all these years, I really love my parents. My mother was a janitor, my father my mother was a janitor, and my father worked construction. And I loved them dearly. And I don't think I had those feelings about being ashamed of each of them. But coming from that neighborhood, made me do that. Made me deny my roots, deny who I am. And so I want to end by saying, whoever you are, embrace where you come from, embrace your parents, because eventually those experiences will shape you into the person you become. Born in Honolulu, raised in Desha Lane, moved to Aliamanu, that's the Hawaiian in me. Mahalo. Mahalo.